remember to buy a copy of your favorite books from the Cheeky Merchants. If we don't have it, we'll source it for you, but we'll definitely find the book for you.
Hello, Cheeky Natives! So excited for today's conversation. Welcome to the Cheeky Natives. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. I thought it was so beautifully profound that we have this conversation when we commemorate Youth Day. I thought it's apt, right? How are you doing?
I have the honor of introducing today's guest, and I think I'm just going to read her bio because our guests are fabulous. Stanga KwaZulu-Natal. She was born in 1986 when apartheid was nearing its end, to a mother who has worked as a domestic worker all her adult life. She has 3 siblings, one of whom is a brother who's autistic and nonverbal. Andile's advocacy for mental health awareness stems from the experiences they faced as a family with a member who was and still is for the most part misunderstood. She dedicates her writing to her mother, and the title of today's book, which is Braids and Migraines, was a runner-up in the Ireland Prize for Unpublished African Novel in 2023. Welcome, Andile. It's so exciting to have you here. How are you?
Thank you so much for having me. This is exciting.
Andile, we've obviously had a conversation with you before at Franschhoek, which was fantastic. Our listeners didn't have the privilege to go to Franschhoek, and so they wouldn't know what Braids and Migraines is about. So may we ask you to please just titillate us, bring us into Nomandla's world for our listeners.
After speaking to Baba, I sat down and cast my eyes towards the tennis court. I listened to the birds and found their sound as beautiful as when I heard them many years ago. Baba must have recognized that he was participating in an act of resistance. To fully enjoy that garden was to forget your title as a servant and see yourself equally deserving of beautiful spaces. It was to forget that in the far distant, someone was going to call your name, loudly, ordering you to fix this and that. It was to forget all that noise and appreciate the now.
I remember the garden, and thank you for bringing me back there. Such little pleasures.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about Nomandla's world, right? So for people who may not know, introduce us into Nomandla's world. Very broad strokes, and then we will go into the specificity as we go along.
Okay. So Nomandla is this interesting young girl growing up in a township in KZN. And she's basically navigating the basic education system. Her parents believe in education. They know that being educated will lead you to having a better life, getting a better salary, and all of that. So basically, at the core of her journey is her navigating the basic education system and her becoming and her being. But also outside of that, she's navigating other social spaces. For example, she goes to work with her dad at a very young age. And that happens because her dad believes that the garden space where he works, her dad is a gardener, will help her with her mental illness journey, basically, because she also has that part of herself. It's not explicitly said in the book, but you can say that she's on the spectrum. She's also dealing with grief. She's lost a sister. So she's just this young girl who has there's a lot going on. And obviously it's post-apartheid. The country is trying to make sense of itself, and therefore she's also part of that journey of trying to make sense of herself. She works hard and she gets the scholarship to study in the school in the city, and she experiences a lot of challenges there. And I don't think I'll go into it, but she experiences a lot of challenges, and eventually she's in matric. She's about to make it out of this world. She's got poverty trauma, so she really wants to make it out of Ziyabuya, which is the name of the township. She's expelled. So it takes us through her mental journey around being expelled from school and what that means. for her and her coming out of that.
I think about how children often don't have a language for the things that they're experiencing. So Nomandla is a child who's effectively without language. She's a child who experiences grief. She's a child who feels like parental abandonment because her mother's also not always in the space to look after in the way that she should. She experiences the abandonment of a schooling system that's meant to look after her but doesn't. I want to talk a little bit about what it means to be, why you wrote about grief and wrote a child who didn't have a language for grief, because Nomandla is grieving throughout the story, but she doesn't have the language. She wouldn't explicitly say, I'm grieving, but she's grieving. She's lost her sister, her father, and now she loses her opportunity to finish at the school. So I want to talk a little bit about grief and what it looks like to be a child without the language for grief.
Oh, man, that's a good one. Yeah, I don't know if this is when I throw in my own personal, but I would like to. Braids and Migraines is fiction, right? So I think in my own personal life as a child, I don't think I had the language for grief, for the fact that I've lost something, and therefore this is why it doesn't feel sunny in my world. System is I went to a farm school, grade 1 to 3. I'll be very quick. And then after that, my parents, there was a separation, and then I moved to stay with my grandmother, which is grade 4, 5. And then I moved back to stay with my mom, grade 6, 7, just all over the place. I could have had a sister, an older sister, but she passed away when she was 2 years old, and my mom was 5 months pregnant with me. I've always had the gap of, damn, I could have had a sister when things were not going the way that I would have liked, particularly in grade 6 and 7, the move to that school. That's when I myself experienced like bullying. I think there's always been an echo of bullying in my own life. It's been going on and on. And so I became a kind of a loner type of child. And I remember having a conversation with my dad. He had come to visit. Oh, you go to Ari Padiachi. Oh, okay. My child goes there. Her name is, yeah. And apparently he spoke to this boy who was like very honest. It's like, oh, she sits on her own under a tree every single day. And he then came and asked me, why do you sit alone? I don't know what I said to him, but that was just the way I navigated life at the time. So I didn't have the language. I didn't know why I was sitting alone. I just did. So I think maybe that's the inspiration for the way Nomandla presents in the book. I do have the language and I do understand what was going on. I could write it that way, cognizant of what she's going through.
Another interesting thing that I think and I are both interested in is the idea of mother-daughter relationships. I find when people think about mother-daughter relationships, they think of them as a best friend type of relationship. So mother and daughter are not supposed to have friction. But I think what you do in this book, particularly Nomandla and her mother, they have a very complex relationship. The fact that there's a sense of abandonment, because in truth, Nomandla's mum is also feeling abandonment and going through her own kind of grief. And we often don't hold space for Black moms to be able to do that and say it's okay for you to be a bad mom, because you're like, oh, she gonna have a mom that's there, but not quite.
Yeah.
You know why it was important for you to explore that dynamic.
Yeah, I wrote Nomandla's mom that way to create space for women who don't have the capacity or the bandwidth to be what they would like to be for their children. I like to think she's trying her best, but her best is really not enough. It's not working for Nomandla, and Mandla retaliates at some point where she says, I'm going to leave you one day. And then Langa is, my life is not tied to you. She just doesn't have that, okay, you say you're going to leave me. That's not really a threat to me because my life is not tied to you. She has I have my own life. So I think it was to I think I said this before, not in this conversation, our previous conversation, that she's just a girl. Mothers are just girls. And I think that comes from my own experience with my own mom, coming to terms with the fact that she was growing up in my childhood, trying her best. Yeah. And I don't want to talk about how it affected me to move from staying with her to staying with my grandmother in grade 4 and grade 5, because she was really just trying her best. So it's really about showing that a person can try their best. And at the time, the best is just not enough. And that there are mothers who just don't have the bandwidth. And I think Langa recognizes that she's okay with Nomandla moving to stay with her brother, Buti. And I think at some point she says, yeah, she recognizes that she's not present. She knows. So I think she was just an interesting character to write for me. I wouldn't change her. Thankfully, there was Buti there, which is also another element as well, where we parentify an older sibling, which means that Buti would have been robbed of his own kind of life and growth.
Actually,
Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit about Buti. And
Yeah.
I think his name is so interesting as well.
Yeah.
It's so interesting if you think about the placements of who he is to his siblings. I think of the letter that he writes. The first is, I think of his romantic relationships and how his upbringing and his familial placement, so who he has to be in his family, how that then affects the ways in which he navigates his romantic relationships. So how we grow up and how we are expected to grow up changes the ways in which we navigate love. And I think that comes out so clearly in his relationship with Primrose. But the other thing is to also think about how kinship doesn't always necessarily mean that there is a knowing. Nomandla doesn't actually know her brother. She knows him as the adult. She knows him as the responsible adult. She knows him as the person who will fight for her, the voice of reason, because her and her mother are very similar in terms of temperaments, etc. But she doesn't know her brother. So it takes that letter to meet her sibling anew, outside of who they are in the familial placements and our familial expectations.
We're taking a short break. We're taking a short break.
I'm the oldest in my family. I'm probably going to bring in my uncle here. I have an uncle, Smanga. He's my favorite uncle, my mom's brother. And so I've always known him as Uncle Smanga, who's just going to show up. If I need something, he's going to be there. He worked at a bank. When I finished matric, he opened my first bank account and he loaded it with 500 Rand. But most recently, in the recent years, I get to know him, his fears and what he went through in high school. So he was the first Black student in this Indian school in Stenger. And there was like 2 of them. And I think he was in matric or in grade 11. I think he went through a mental breakdown. He got sick and then he was in hospital for a while. And when he came back, there was just this pull and push. It was just not, I don't think he still has the language for what was happening to him. But I'm only learning about this now. The book was done. And I'm like, this is crazy. It's crazy to learn about you were the first student at this school and you went through all of this. But it's him that I'm getting to know as I am older myself. But I also feel that I am also allowing my younger siblings to get to know me. Otherwise, before that, I was like withheld. I just didn't share anything about myself to them. But I do find myself sharing a bit more with my own struggles. Like I am able to share with my sister. I am just a girl.
Yeah. I think about Nomandla's grief a lot, right? So we've spoken about the loss of a sister, but wanted to speak about her being like daddy's little girl. You spoke about her going to work with her dad at quite a young age, which I think during that time was what all young children were supposed to do. We didn't have a babysitter, so you had to take your child to work. But it felt that her and her dad had created a particular bond as a result of the fact that they spent so much time together. Right? She was this girl who was working in this house. And I wanted to speak a little bit about that, but I also wanted to speak about what I found was really heartbreaking for me is her dad passes away, and at some point they take his remains, and they are meager, right? They're like little remains. And it felt for me the harmful effect, right, of poverty and its dehumanizing effect, right? This all he has is a bed, a couch. It's small. But I wanted to speak about two aspects. The first aspect is to speak about this kind of blossoming and beautiful relationship that she has with her dad and how she feels more understood by her dad. And then I wanted to speak about the flip side of that, which is the grief that she experiences when her dad passes away, but also the reminder of poverty and its debilitating effect.
I wanted to write a soft dad, soft character. I remember when I was the first time I tried to write Braids and Migraines, the dad character, the father figure, was very like the father figure in the townships who is like your typical abusive, my own experiences, right? But I came to a point of not wanting to write a father who was like that and not giving too much airtime to a father who was like that, but creating a dad that had a sense of like hope and who was struggling with his own demons, but he was trying his best for his children, the best he could until he couldn't anymore. So that's the kind of dad I wanted to write. And also his relationship with Nomandla. I don't know if I should bring in my own, but I was a dad's girl before my dad left. So I think it was dreamy almost. That's the thing about creative writing. It's like you can write a dream of, I would have liked a dad who was like this, present emotionally, who can hear, who can see. Yeah, but obviously until he couldn't because of the circumstances of his history and his background and his own grief. Father figure within a South African context who was like Nomandla's dad, because outside of my own experience of what a father is, I've had friends who had amazing fathers, just like Nomandla's dad. So for me, I suppose it's probably part of the healing process. I look up to those men and I wanted to portray them because they were just so fascinating and so lovely. Yeah. One of my friends in high school, first time I met her dad, he was like, "Oh, you're such a beautiful girl, aren't you?" And it's like, "Oh, I've never heard that from a father figure." So yeah, I wanted to write a soft dad who sees young girls and Black young girls, hears them. And obviously shame. He cannot, his background is too much for him.
Without making the book sound like it's just all this, right?
Bloom.
The most beautiful relationships in this book are the ones between the teenage girls, right? Like
Yeah.
the ways in which the girls love each other and care for each other. And so I wanted to speak about why you wrote this book as what feels like an ode to the healing power of female friendships. There's a way in which the girls, all in different ways, heal different parts of Nomandla, be it her self-esteem, be it her exposure. This is such a healing book, right? And an ode to the ways in which women's friendships can heal them. So I wanted to chat a little bit about that.
It's amazing because my own friendships with girls has healed me in many ways in different parts of my life. And it's always the girls, for some reason, I don't know how this happened, but the girls that I found, okay, there are others, but like my best friend when I was younger, Ubongi, her dad was amazing, her mom was amazing, and I'd always feel at home when I was around them. And she was very honest, she still is. She's probably very honest. And then you move on. And then my friend Umpome, it was more around her helping me navigate around, what do you want to study? I didn't know what I wanted to study. I just wanted to write. And she was like, okay, just do journalism. And that's how I got into journalism. And so there's always been a Black woman in my corner. And if you care to look, there's always a Black woman in your corner, until I could afford a therapist who helped me out of a very difficult job situation. It was important for me to portray those characters and put them in there as honest, as raw as they are. And Primrose is so amazing because she reminds me of a lady I met while I was at varsity who was such a reader, who was warm. So there's always been like a Black woman just having me if I cared to look. Like, it's just always been.
I'm
sorry.
Right. Because I'm going to take us back to the not so great. I've really been interested in the cost of white women's tears. And I think that we know, as people who are Black, who grew up in South Africa particularly, that the cost of white women's tears are costly. In the United States, for instance, like an Emmett Till instance, like the cost of white women's tears could be death. And I wanted to speak about the cost of white women's or white girls' tears in this context, because you alluded to the fact that Nomandla experiences bullying when she's at the school, right? And so for me, there are two things that are happening. One is that it feels like assimilation acts as a form of gratitude for the scholarship, right? So you have to toe the line in order for you to stay in school. I think of our own experiences as Black kids who went to former Model C schools or private schools. And then I wanted to speak about the cost of white girls' tears, because I think that they really screw things up for Nomandla. We talk about her kind of not having the ability to finish her senior year, but it's not as a result of what she's done. It's a result of what has happened to her and the cost of white girls' tears. And I wanted to speak a little bit about why it was important for you to speak about a real thing, right? That like white girls' tears could end and chance at an education, and also a chance at entering a job market or even having a job. And I wanted to speak a little bit about why it was important for you to put the two next to each other. They're grateful, particularly for Nomandla, because the other Black girls have their...
Yeah. I think when I was in that space of writing Casey, Marie, it's really, you can read it as is. You can also read it as, like you've done now, like metaphorically. It represents so much outside of the schooling system, like different other social settings, like the workspace. It represents so much. But Casey in particular, I'll draw back to the book, has this thing where when someone knows you and they know your background, like Casey does, and so she looks at her as undeserving to be in that space, just goes along with it. She's not questioning if this is right, if this is wrong, the impact of what they're doing. She just goes along with it. There's this historical mindset as well within Casey that is not loosened. I don't want to say that she represents the scars of apartheid, but she does. And it also comes from, you see when you meet her for the first time and you meet her mother is also not the kind of person who she presents as someone who doesn't believe. And so Casey takes that to school and she's very much aware, I believe, of what she's doing. And we see her when she cries, she knows what the crying is going to do to Nomandla. And she knows that's going to ruin her life. Marie, on the other hand, I'm not sure if she was as aware as Casey of what was going to happen. So you have two people. One is very much aware of what she's doing, and the other is just going with the flow. So it puts this question across: when you are in a position of power and you present how you present in society, and you're very much aware of the history of the country, like, what are you doing about it? Like in the workspace, you know that you present as a white woman and you know your privilege. What are you doing about that? Are you elevating people of color or Black people, or are you a Casey type of thing? But it's really about these power dynamics playing there, where one is very much aware of what they're doing, and they treat Nomandla this way because they know her from before. They have a background knowledge of her, and so they don't think she deserves to be in the space that she's in. And so it's a really sad mindset to have.
Fully aware anything she says, how it will come across to those in power. And Casey's fully aware of the cost of her tears. Where Marie was just happy to have a friend in some ways. And so and I think what's harmful about Marie is that because she knows she's a white woman, because she knows there is, let's call it white innocence, right? So she'll ultimately will be like, but I wasn't fully aware of the impact. But she knew that something was amiss and she just didn't act on it. For me, Casey and Marie were really hard for me because we know these white women. We know what the cost of these white girls' tears are for how we show up in the world or how we continue to make a living. And for me, that was profound because I feel it also allows people who read the book to really reflect.
Yeah.
When you don't speak, you're part of the problem.
You must say something.
Not innocuous. So to plead ignorance is also not true because we see in the book, initially they say, I didn't know. But when things go sour between them, Marie comes out with it that you didn't know. You purposely choose to ignore them because of who they're happening to. It's about choosing what you consider to be worth noting and worth speaking about and what choose not, based on who it's happening to.
Yeah.
But I'm also interested, I think you do this thing where you write about good girls and bad girls, right? So the good girls who follow the rules, who acquiesce, versus somebody like Anande who opinionated, etc.
Yeah.
She gets into fights with people. She lets them know that they can't talk to her in any old way. But also she's just a woman who doesn't necessarily always toe the line. And so I was interested in that characterization of the good girls versus the bad girls and some of the consequences of being a woman who doesn't always toe the line.
I actually think about her. There's a scene where she fights on behalf of Nomandla. There's this culturally, there is a word called ula. If you are in mourning and you are dressed in your mourning clothes, you're not supposed to fight or argue. But okay, if I need to fight for my child, then I will do it. I don't care that I'm in mourning. I really like her, as crazy as she is. We live in a society where women like that are punished. Just like how you can see that during that scene, other women are ganging up on her because of the way she is, because of her strength, because of her being opinionated. Yeah, so I wanted to write women who are that way because I have seen women that are that way, whether in the township or the village or wherever. And I've always just been fascinated by them and I've just always loved them and how they navigate the being othered as well. As much as it hurts, that does not stop them from being who they are.
I wanted to talk about Nande. Nande is just such an interesting character. So the twins are, in many ways, very sad because she gets to see what she's effectively missed out on. This sisterhood, this person that loves you, that has your back, she's missed out on that, right? So it's very sad because she sees that. But then you also see how Zazile is the more diplomatic twin. But Nande in the book, if you come across her, you're just like, what is this girl's problem? But Nande, it turns out, one of Nomandla's greatest allies. So I think a lot about how sometimes love is honesty. Sometimes love looks like people holding you to account. But also sometimes love is rough and tumble. So it's beautiful. Yeah. Some of the things that Nande says in the book, you're just like, why would you say that?
Yeah.
But she's such an interesting character, and her relationship with Nomandla is also very interesting because of all the things that I've just spoken to. So I wanted to talk a little bit about Nande and why Nande is the person that helps Nomandla come to herself.
Nande for me is also an interesting character because a young girl just trying to make sense of where she lives, what she has, what she doesn't have. And because she's an honest person, anger and rage will come out the way it does. She needs to hold space for Nomandla. I would think that she feels that no one is holding space for her. So then she just retaliates. And it's not because she doesn't love her anymore, but it's just like frustration. Yeah, so I wanted, her to be like an honest, open person who's just also becoming, who's also hurting, who's also like angry. And they feel, I don't know if it's the right word to say unseen, because she's very much seen, but she's also going through the most. And she just doesn't have the bandwidth to hold space for someone that could have made it in the city. And so she even goes to say that, go back to the city. So just an honest young girl who is just also becoming.
The book does cover real topics, heavy topics, but it also has lighter moments, like teenage moments, if we can call it that. And I wanted to speak a little bit about teenage moments, or kind of the teenage loving, almost triangle, but not really quite triangle. I wanted to speak about why it was important for you to also pepper the book with that softness. Although these children are dealing with these massive things, there's also this little bit of, oh my God, because Nomandla has this boy who's, oh baby, I'm gonna marry you. And I wanted to speak more about why it was important, right? I think I've been thinking a lot about joy, and I felt like this was a joyful, playful thing, and I wanted to speak about that decision to include, because it's like you can call it a D storyline. It's not on any surface, but it's really on the periphery, but also periphery. And I wanted to speak a little bit about that.
Oh, yes. New boy Tando. I think it's just to show that Nomandla she's alive, and that she's a human being, and that she feels, and she's reminded of that when she sees new boy Tando in that space. And she just appreciates him, all of him. And so it was important for me to allow Nomandla to go into that space in her mind and just sit there for a few minutes. So yeah, I think just to show her as someone who can love and who is deserving of love and who's deserving of feeling those feelings. Yeah. Nomandla as a lover girl, or Nomandla in love.
I enjoyed Tando because I think that your characters are so complex, right? So like when you meet Tando, he's a bit younger and he's just a little bit annoying.
Yeah.
But he also has these pockets of empathy and things that he does. And to see him just like mature, right? So people grow and they become different. See, before we close, I think a lot about hair. And it's funny because I was saying this to my husband. I'm going on holiday somewhere and I'm like, oh God, I need to do something about my hair.
Hair's a mess right now.
You know what I mean?
At the back.
So Black women's hair is also the site of a lot of trauma. But in this book, you use black hair in very interesting ways, right? So there is a scene in the book where when Nomandla and her friends go and get her hair done, and she has the experience of doing her hair out for the first time. So she learns to speak up, and that's even like a running.
Yeah.
But I'm so interested in the use of hair in this book as a metaphor, as a rite of passage, as a site of trauma, but also as a place where Black women go to find themselves.
Because it's really, Nomandla, it's the ways in which she finds her voice and finds herself, and by the kind of hairstyle that she wants, her wanting the beads, it's like a reclaiming of herself. So yeah, it's fascinating that it is called Braids and Migraines, because before that she hadn't done any braids. Her mom would just shave her hair, and it was just like, but it's like a place where she defines herself.
I definitely don't want us to leave the conversation without speaking about what I think the book does powerfully, which is to name mental health and the way in mental health shows up, right? Because we can see Nomandla's mom has some aspects of something is going on. Like we often think about mental health as anxiety or depression. And I wanted to speak about why it was important for you to write about mental health, because as we know, you, in some ways, have your own experiences about people misunderstanding your sibling. And it feels like most of the time I've watched this lady on TikTok, and she speaks a lot about anxiety, and she's talking about the idea that like when you meet someone and you tell them like you're anxious and they're like, oh my gosh, you just stop being anxious, like just let it go.
Yeah,
The kind of stigmatizing, but also diminishing, right, of mental health. It's not a serious condition because it's not diabetes.
Yeah.
A bit about why it was important for you to speak about mental health, name it as such, and also, you know, your thoughts around people thinking about it as a...
Yeah. Yo, it's crazy, like the things that you hear. At some point, you hear things like depression is demonic, you can pray it away. And at some point, my brother's autism, we were meant to pray that away as well. But really, it's important to recognize it as a mental illness, as an illness, needing attention, needing medication, and not being afraid of medication because there's like a stigma around, yo, you're taking medication now. It's okay. It's okay. The chemicals are not balancing. I need help with that. The same way if I have period pains, I'm going to need Mybilin or Mybulin. It's really just about breaking the misconceptions and writing a character who's going through what they're going through in the township. The parents just not trying their best to help her. They're not conceive in Nomanda's mom. She doesn't say she's okay with Nomanda taking her medication. They actually worry if she is not taking her medication. So it's just breaking the stigma. Sometimes a person is just on the spectrum and they might just need extra help, and that's okay.
Now that the book is out there, and in some ways it's been a love letter to yourself, to Black girls, to women healing from trauma, what would you like the book to do in this world? What do you hope for the book?
Oh, I would like to.
I want to say the audience, I wish you could see Andile's right now. It's like, oh, wow, a beautiful moment. Oh, wow, that's deeply profound. So sorry, Andile,
Yeah.
I can't say your face was...
It is profound. I think for me, it's really about healing. If it can heal some parts of somebody out there, then that would be amazing for me. That is my dream. That is my wish. It's the healing and having conversations around mental health, conversations around bullying in workspaces and schools, and just healing really of the communities of our country. And I know it's going to take a while, but that is the dream.
Before we go, we'd like to ask authors if there's like a cheeky preview. Is there something happening? Because we don't want to miss out, right?
Yes. No, I'll let you know.
No, now
I will definitely let you know. Right now I'm studying. I'm doing my final year for my master's. When I'm done with that, I will put my focus on a new creative thing.
it's been really wonderful to talk to you about what we felt was an absolutely incredible debut, which resonates, I think, with so much. We hope that people will pick it up. Our deepest gratitude for writing. You know, sometimes people say fiction is truer than real life. And seeing that in many ways through this book, you've navigated some of your own reflections about your life and how they show up. So thank you for that. And we wish you the very best for your masters.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Cheeky Natives. We will see you on the next episode as we delve deeper into our favorite books and have these conversations. Please remember to subscribe and tell a friend to listen to the Cheeky Natives and buy the books of African authors everywhere.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of The Cheeky Natives. Don't forget to subscribe, review, and rate the podcast on all your streaming platforms.